the whole reason for this is to share with other women. And so I think a lot of women are going to appreciate hearing your story. So thank you. Thank you for being here and for sharing your
Thanks for
story
giving
with
me a place
everyone.
to share. And so,
Yes, yes. I'm excited. I haven't had anyone um, with me, or I haven't had anyone sit down with me and have a chat over embryo adoption. So this is going to be
yeah,
the first. I'm really, really excited about this.
awesome. Well, I am very excited to share.
Yay. So let's get started. Tell us, when did this journey start for you? When did you know that you needed help? And if you remember, how old were you?
So, I had to actually write this down because I was like,
Yeah,
it's all kind of becomes a blur.
it
But
does.
my husband and I got married in 2013. I was 22. So that seems super young now, thinking back, but I
Yes.
was 22. He was in medical school at that time. And I was on contraceptives. We had, with his school and everything, we had decided that we weren't ready to start a family. And then after a lot of discussion, we decided in 2014, so I was 23, that we were going to stop contraceptives, but we weren't going to necessarily be trying to start a family. We were just going to
Yeah.
kind of, be prayerful and things like that, and kind of see where God took us. So I stopped in 2014, and about 6 months in, we started doing some like ovulation tracking and things like that. And just started being more intentional about trying to start a family. And kind of, I guess, a little backstory, I had an OBGYN appointment scheduled that happened to be about a year out from when I would stop my contraceptive. So I thought, in my mind, I was like, well, if I'm not pregnant then, I'll just bring it up to my OB when I go. So for about, 4 to 6 months, did some like ovulation tracking, did not become pregnant. So just at my routine OBGYN visit, I mentioned to her, like, hey, I haven't been on birth control for about a year. We've been more like purposeful in trying and tracking. And I just kind of want to see what your thoughts are. Like, I was still obviously very young. I was 24. Well, I guess I was getting closer to 25 then at that point. But I was like, hey, what do you think? And she was like, hey, I don't think, this is normal. Most people a year off of birth control would already be pregnant if they were able to without any assistance. So she's like, I think we should definitely look into this, which I really appreciated because I know a lot of women don't necessarily have that experience with their OB.
Right.
But my OB was like, hey, let's not wait. Like, you've already kind of been more purposeful for 6 months. Let's go ahead and address it now. She's like,
Yeah.
let's get the process started, which I really appreciated from her. So she said, easiest thing to do is we'll draw some blood on you and we'll do a semen analysis on your husband. She was like, that's something we can quickly rule out. So let's start there. So I was like, okay, great. Like, I didn't really think, this was really going to be a big deal or anything. So my husband went in, he gave his sample, they took my blood work, and I will never forget, I was driving home from work. I was a nurse, so it was about like 7:30 in the evening. And my husband called me on my way home and he was like, hey, I need to talk to you when you get home. And I just remember having this feeling like, well, I was like, what is it? He was like, I just want to wait till we're like together. And I remember like my mind kind of went there. I was like, this is odd. Like, that's not how he normally is. And I remember I got home and I went to his office and he was like, hey, your doctor called me just a few minutes ago. And I know, and he was like, she was calling me from home. I was like, oh, okay,
Uh-oh.
that's unusual. I know doctors aren't normally calling from their house at 7 o'clock
Right.
at night. And he told me, she said that my sample came back. They looked at it and I had no sperm.
Oh,
And I was like, no sperm? Like, what do
wow.
you mean? None. Like, I'd heard about like low sperm count
Yeah.
and, like poor motility, all these things, but none was something that him nor I had ever really even thought was like even a possibility. So she was great. And she had told him, she was like, we're just going to look into this further, like maybe like was a fluke. But like, we'll get you in. We thankfully were at Birmingham, Alabama, is where we live. So we had like a big medical center there at UAB. And so she referred us to a urologist who specialized in male infertility. So we went and saw him like very soon after, and he was like, let's start and like just repeat this test to make sure. And sure enough, once again, nothing. So it was just obviously kind of shocking, but I mean, I just remember the feelings we both had. My husband, you know, it broke my heart. Like, he just felt like such a burden of responsibility, even though it was by no means that. But the doctor said, kind of course of action, let's do a testicular biopsy. He said sometimes there can be sperm in the testicles, and for some reason, like, they're not able to come out. So in January, that was January of 2016, we had that done. He went in and had the biopsy done, and once again, there was no sperm found. Wow. And so at that time, they diagnosed him with something called Sertoli cell-only syndrome. So basically what that meant was that the Sertoli cells, which is what like nourishes sperm, is the only thing seen. There's no like even immature sperm cells seen. So that was something, once again, we had never heard of and never really even thought about. So that kind of halted the whole like process. There was no more further workup done on me. I'd had lab work done. It came back normal. And we spoke though with the reproductive endocrinologist, who kind of told us like what our options were at that point. And unfortunately, they weren't like a lot of options. You know, if there aren't any sperm, there's not really much you can do. Right. There was a recommendation. They said really kind of the only path would be if you wanted to have like, it's called like a testicular sperm extraction. They can go in and do some kind of like mapping and search for areas where sperm would be, but there was just a lot of uncertainty, like the chance of finding sperm and then them being good quality and all those things was probably not super great. And it was going to be very expensive, you know, painful, could have like lasting long-term effects for him. And then even if they found sperm, then our only IVF option was going to be ICSI IVF. So we kind of talked about it and decided that wasn't something we were going to pursue. So that was in 2016. And honestly, at that point, we just kind of halted. We were like, we don't know what we want to do. We can see that we probably are not going to be able to have genetic children. And we were people of faith, and that's really the most important thing to us, was kind of letting God lead us at that point. And so really, we ended up kind of putting the brakes on for a few years. And over those like 2 years, there was a lot of prayer, and a lot of crying, and a lot of arguments. And we just really didn't know where God was leading us, because, I mean, now I'm able to look back and see what God's plan was. But I know there's a lot of women that may be, and men that may be in the position we were. And at that time, there was a lot of grieving. We had found out that we were not going to be able to have genetic children, and we grieved that for a number of years. And it was all I had ever wanted to do was be a mom, and like the thought that was so far out of reach, and that we felt like God had really told us that that wasn't going to happen. And so it was just honestly like a really dark time. And so now, and I thought about that this morning when I was thinking over things, like I can so easily see what his plan was, but I do want to validate the feelings I had at that time that were really hard and really dark and really normal. And so we just really didn't know where God was going to lead us. So
yeah. So
I know a lot of people.
I want to stop at that point because, wow, I can't imagine. I can, because we all go through our own paths and our own realities. But I want to just sit there because there are going to be other women who, like you said, or you're addressing, who are going to see this, and they're at that point where they're thinking, I don't know if I should move forward. I don't know, what are my options? So can you just, you know, give us a little bit of insight? Obviously, it sounds like you are a praying woman, and I don't know about you, but I couldn't have done any of this without the Lord. I would have,
Absolutely
right?
not.
I would have given up a long time ago, or would have done sabotage myself in some way or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you could just speak to to you who just found that out, the reality of that. What was it that helped you kind of along the way? Did you have support? Was there anybody you could talk to? What are the options that you two were both walking through and considering?
Yeah, I mean, definitely would not have made it without God. Like, because there was times when we found out, when I was questioning God, to be honest, where I was like,
Yeah.
why did he put this desire in my heart to be a mother, this desire that's so pure and that
Yeah.
he tells me is okay? Like, why would he put that there if he didn't want me to be a mom? And so, I
Mhm.
mean, there were so many times of like just questioning and just heartache. And that really, and then honestly, my husband, our discussion, I mean, really, he was like, maybe God's saying we don't need to be parents. Maybe he wants to use these feelings that we have to care for children, like in other ways. And that caused a lot of tension between us because I felt so strongly I wanted to be a mother. But I mean, honestly, it took laying aside my own desire and really being able to like open myself up to what God's plan was for my life.
Mhm.
And I had to really put aside that I want to have a child desire kind of to the side and say, hey, God, like, I want to serve you. I have this desire in my heart, but how do you want to use it? And that he didn't necessarily promise me like, hey, Andrea, you're going to be a mom. That wasn't the promise he gave me. That he gave me the
Yeah.
promise that I was going to, if I followed him and served him, like I could have life forever in him. And
Mhm.
so once I started really leaning into that and leaning into like, how can I serve him? How can we use this position that he really put us in that's very unique? How can we use it for him? That really, once I kind of emotionally came to that through prayer and through conversation with my husband and reaching out to, family and friends that were supporting us, like that was really when I felt like I could make decisions that were in line with what he wanted to do. And so I really have to give him all the credit. And
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have been able to grieve, and I did. I allowed myself to grieve that what I
Yeah.
thought was going to be my life, being a mom. And to me, that had just naturally seemed like it would be too like a genetic child. And I grieved that. Just, I mean, it's not like I had lost a child, but I had lost the children I thought I was going to have.
Yeah.
And so once I turned it over to him, that it changed everything. And I prayed that he would lead us, and that if that was to be able to be parents, that he would open my husband's heart to that, and that he would show us how he wanted us to do that. And embryo adoption happened to be something that I had heard about at some point. I honestly don't even remember, but and I talked to my husband about it. And I remember one night after, like I said, it had been about 2 years, we were going to sleep, and he was like, hey, I thought about it, and I think maybe this is what God wants us to do. And I was like, okay, like let's look into it.
That's
So that was
huge.
really kind of how we got to that point. So,
Wow.
but
Oh,
and
that's
one
so
thing
good.
I had on my wall a sign, and it was something I repeated every single day, numerous times a day, was faith in God includes faith in His timing.
Mm.
Because, and I mean, I literally told myself that every single day, and that was like my mantra.
Yeah. Wow. What an example of you submitting to the Lord and you dying of yourself. It's not
Yeah,
easy.
well,
It's
I
so
can't take the
hard.
credit.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I
God is so good, and for Him to
yeah,
lead you to
absolutely.
this place, it's just incredible,
Mm,
incredible.
yeah. Mm.
ah,
Mm.
okay. So what comes next after He says, "All right, I think that this is what we're supposed to do"?
Yeah, so we started once my husband, he was like, I think this is where he was leading us. Like I said, our main goal was to let our unique situation be used for his glory. And so
Hmm.
when my husband and I started looking into it, we realized embryo adoption was something that a lot of people don't even know about. Like I said, I had read an article about it like some years before, but we had never known anyone to do it. I had not ever really seen anything about it. It was not something that was presented to as an option through our reproductive endocrinologist that we had seen. And we started looking into it, and we were kind of shocked to find out some details that we could then see like this is a really big area of need. There's like hundreds of thousands to millions of embryos that are frozen, and the number that are available, they speculate that are actually available for adoption is probably somewhere north of like 50 to 60,000, and only probably about 1,000 to 2,000 are actually being adopted a year. So when you think of those numbers, like that's so many embryos that are waiting, and of course, like with time, the embryos might become less viable. And so we believe that life starts at conception, and we really felt like if that's what we believe and what we feel like God is telling us, like these lives are so important. Like they're there and they're waiting. And from everything we thought was God had given me a working uterus. He'd given us this very unique situation, and we had hearts that were open to adoption. And this was a type of adoption that we had not really considered. And so once we started talking that over, like I said, my husband was kind of not sure about it for a while, but the more he prayed and meditated on it, and I honestly was like, hey, I'm going to have to step back. Like, I can't bother him about this. Like, if this is where God really wants us to go, he's going to work on his heart and he's going to lead us to this. And so
Totally.
I think that was an important thing because I wanted us to be on the same page because it's so important, in any kind of
Mhm.
infertility for the spouses to be on the same page, because
Yeah.
if one person's going this way and one person's going this way, what's already really hard, like can really
Yeah.
tear you apart. And
Mhm.
so with that waiting, and then my husband, after so much prayer, he's like, I think this is something that's so important and so crucial and a big, big need. And so we had decided that we wanted to move forward with embryo adoption. And we found out about the National Embryo Donation Center. It's in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Mm.
And so we had done some looking. There's a few places, in the United States that do embryo adoption. And we found out about NEDC. And we decided, though, first we were going to go back to UAB and see if this was something they offered. And so we went there, and this was in, I guess it was technically around the beginning of 2018, like the first of the year. We went to UAB, and they're like, yes, actually, we're going to start doing this. Like, if you wait, like, y'all can be some of the first people to do it. And so
Wow.
we were excited, but then, like, the ball was kind of like really slowly moving. And so we decided, they were like, we're not sure when this is actually going to start. Like, this is something we want to do, but there's so many like red tape and things like that. So you might want to look somewhere else. And so that was when we remembered NEDC, and we sent in our application in summer 2018. And they are actually a faith-based organization. And so we felt really good about that we were working with people who had similar values to us, and really, really their whole mission is just about the embryos and supporting the donating families and the receiving families, and just the main goal of giving the embryos a chance for life. And so knowing that they were a group of people that had those beliefs, it really just kind of felt like a good fit. And
Mhm.
so we submitted our application in the summer of 2018, and we got our initial appointment in October. We went on Halloween in 2018, And at that point, they did like a saline sonogram on me to make sure everything was okay. They did a trial transfer just to see if there was anything they needed to know about for the future. And once we got medical clearance, things kind of moved a little quicker. With using an organization like NEDC, we had to have a home study done. So kind of like a traditional or international adoption. So we actually had a home study done with a social worker. And so around the very end of December, that was completed. So then January of 2019, we proceeded with picking our donor profiles. We decided to do a closed embryo adoption, but there is a closed adoptions available and open adoptions available. But we decided that we were going to do the closed adoption. But the big thing with us was we may be doing a closed adoption, but we had an absolutely open heart. And so we are so open with this about sharing. We love sharing about it with everyone we meet, people in the grocery store or at the gas station. And we're going to be very open about it with our daughter as she grows up. We already read books about it. But so we got hundreds of profiles, which, shows you how many embryos are just already available. And we picked 2 profiles. One had embryos that had been frozen for 23 years. And that was something that we had really prayed over, that God would just kind of guide us to the embryos he had already planned for us. And when we saw how long those embryos had been waiting, we were like, we want to give them a chance. Like,
Wow.
We don't know, like, if this is going to be like a deterrent to some people. Like, they've been waiting, and there were things about the parents that just kind of resonated with us. So we picked them as our first selection. And then our backup donor had 8 embryos. And so we actually did our first transfer in March of 2019. And they followed the first 2, the 23-year-old embryos, and they had poor grades. But NEDC, being people of faith, they value the life of all embryos. And so they transferred those 2 and then thawed a 3rd embryo from our backup donor. And that's our daughter's genetic sibling that they did. So we transferred 3 embryos, and I had a chemical pregnancy that first time. So that was another dark time, because it was the first time we really felt a lot of hope. Like, we knew what we were doing, we felt was what God wanted us to do. And then, like, when I get the call that the numbers are going the right direction, there was so much rejoicing and anxiety, because I had my faith fully in God, but unfortunately, I'm a human, and that anxiety and those feelings, can weigh heavy. Yes. And so I was, very anxious, and we followed the numbers for probably 2 weeks, and they were going up, but not fast enough, and then started going down. And it was honestly, I would say, for me personally, it was some of the hardest, it was probably the hardest part, even up there with finding out we wouldn't be able to have genetic children, because I had already, like, given my heart to those babies. I loved them so much. And I know anyone that's been through the IVF process, or you love your embryos before they even put them in. When you get that picture and you see them, they're your babies, and you love them so much. And so that was hard. And the thing that I kept telling myself was that what we had done was good, and we'd given them a chance. And, like, what better that instead of being in the freezer for however long, they get to be in Jesus's arms. And so that was what gave me a lot of peace. And so we waited a few months, and then in July of 2019, we transferred 1 embryo, and it was our daughter Vivian. And so that's kind of where we were rejoicing and everything. The whole time I was so nervous, but now she's here, and God is good.
Oh, that's so good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. That's incredible. Wow. So The first donor family, it was only 2 embryos, was that right? The
Yes,
23
they
year old?
had 2 embryos. Mhm.
Okay. And then Vivian's genetic sibling went with the first transfer. How
Yes,
so
correct.
how does it work? Like how many like do you pay per embryo or do you say like is there an agreement that says if you have one, you got to have them all? Like how does that work?
So with it, what I can most speak to is how things are at NEDC. So that's what I'll talk about. But with them, so you pay NEDC for anyone that is interested in donating embryos. They can do so at no cost. So NEDC will pay all the fees to have the embryos transferred from wherever they're stored to NEDC. And then they'll also continue to pay to have them stored on site at NEDC. So when you adopt the embryos, you are responsible for paying NEDC back for those fees that they had paid to have them transferred to their facility. So our first profile, and those fees vary based on the facility they came from and things like that. So they only have you pay though for embryos that you thaw and use. So if we had only used the first profile, we would have only paid for those embryos fees. And it's not for NEDC to make any money. They're just having you reimburse them for those specific fees.
Wow.
And so in our situation, the first time we paid the fees for both sets of embryos, the Vivian's genetic siblings and the ones that have been frozen for 23 years. And so we decided that we wanted, of course, we had Vivian, and so we want to use the 6 remaining siblings. So now we pay the storage fees every year. But with NEDC, if you were to decide your family is complete, you would just relinquish the embryos back to NEDC, and then another family would be able to adopt them.
I see. So is it so the embryos are like on hold until you've
Yes.
figured out okay. Wow.
Yep. And we would have been able to, with Vivian's, they have them on hold under our name because we're the ones that are, paying and storing them there. So, but it's kind of, I guess, kind of different in that way. And then, of course, with the open adoption, if people were to do that, that's kind of all drafted up in like the open donation agreement with the donating family. So in those situations, the donating family can make decisions about who adopts their embryos, what amount of communication there would be. All of that is decided through NEDC. They have people that handle all that with the mediation and draft, the contract and things like that. And so in those situations, if they weren't going to use all the embryos, it would have been decided amongst the families, so both the donating and the receiving families.
Wow. How incredible. So I'm sorry if
Yeah.
you've already said this, but how old were Vivian's like her siblings? How old were those
Yeah.
embryos?
She was frozen for 12 years. So her and her sibling were frozen for 12 years. And then the embryos that we have that are her other genetic siblings, they have been frozen for 10 years. So at this point, it was 10 years. So yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
I
So
love to
how
tell
did
people when they see her, I'm like, she was frozen for 12 years. And so
yes.
to me, that's one thing that I always think about is that when we were in the lowest point trying to decide what God's plan for our life was, Vivian was already there. She was already there. She was frozen, waiting on us. God knew that she was going to be our baby. And so when I think about that she was already there, like it blows my mind. And that she was there frozen before my husband and I even got married. And
That's
so it's wild to think
incredible.
about.
It's amazing. It is so amazing. Wow. Wow. Oh man. So a question that I like to ask is if you know, before you went through all of this stuff and all of the changes and the processing that you had to do, the accepting and the grieving and all of that, is there anything that you would have told your younger self before going into all of this that could have possibly made a difference or helped in any way?
I think just trust is a big thing. Just for as a person of faith, just to trust God that was not in my hands, that because I'm kind of one of those people that can be a little bit controlling of things. I was always a planner. I want to know when and that kind of thing. And just really just to trust that God has a plan for my life, and that nothing that I do, nothing that I, think like can really change that plan, that his plan is already there, and that, that I need to just submit myself to him and just to put my trust in him and to know that he's going to take care of me. And that was really, it took me, like I said, a while to come to the realization, because I was just so angry and sad and just heartbroken and wanted things to be different. And now I think, like, if God had let me run the show and have a baby the way I wanted to have a baby, I would never have had Vivian. And now, like, I wish you had told me, like, hey, I can take all the pain away. Like, we can go back in time and we can make it easy. I would say, no, 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 no. Like, this is what I want. Like, this baby and her siblings that I've never even met, like, these are the babies that you have planned for me. And, like, to think that I would have missed out on that, and honestly, to think about who I was, like, spiritually and just as a person before infertility, like the lessons I learned, and I mean, I wouldn't just like change that. Like, it was hard and it was painful, and I mean, sometimes, like, one thing is we're gonna do a sibling transfer, and I'm gonna have to end my breastfeeding journey earlier than I would like. And I just think, though, that even these things that are hard and don't seem fair, like, that it's bigger than me, and God uses these things to shape us. And like I said, I feel so strongly that he has used our infertility and for his glory, and that if it wasn't for this, like, I feel like he put it on my heart to advocate for embryo adoption, because so many people don't know that this is an available option, and they just, struggle and just grieve every time that they have a failed cycle, and they don't know that this option is out there and that these babies are waiting. And I think that if I had continued to fight so hard for, like, what I thought I wanted, that I would have missed this, like, purpose that he gave me. And I just really do. I feel like he has used the situation to, like, just spread knowledge and just to advocate for those that don't have a voice, because these babies are so tiny and they're frozen and they can't speak for themselves, and just to give hope to people, because I mean, I felt hopeless at points, and I know there's other people that we have told about embryo adoption, and somebody actually that we have talked to about embryo adoption had their baby last week. And I just, and it's just so exciting. They went through the NEDC as well, to see another baby that's here, and to think that, like, if God hadn't have, helped us soften our hearts and open our hearts, that maybe we would have missed out on telling other people that it's changed their life too. And so I just, trust is the biggest thing. Like, I would have told myself, hey, don't try to control things, lean into God, trust him, and he's going to guide you.
There's so much wisdom in that. Because
he was the one that showed it. I mean, like you said, it's just hard.
It is for anyone going through this infertility journey, no matter what diagnosis or issue that they're facing. If there's something different that you haven't said already, what would you say to someone who is facing embryo adoption?
I do think it's important to have completely kind of grieved what you thought was going to be the way your family would grow. Like, I think that was so important, that Nick and I together had grieved the genetic children we thought we were going to have. And I think because we had taken the time, like I said, we spent 2 years before we moved forward in our journey. And I think because we had, like, adequately grieved that and allowed ourselves to grieve that it had us ready to do embryo adoption, and it had our hearts ready and open to loving our baby, whoever it was going to be. that we didn't have any reservations. And I think that's a really important thing, because I mean, embryo adoption to me, what I explain to people is I adopted my baby when she was a tiny embryo and I grew her inside me. And so I just really think that if you haven't grieved the loss of the genetic children you think you are going to have, that it could really, I think, maybe lead to some like conflicting emotions and things like that. So I think that's a really important thing. And I mean, with any type of adoption, you just have to have an open heart and be emotionally ready. And so I think that's just a huge thing, as being emotionally ready. And for us, a big part of that was our faith, but you know, other people that have different backgrounds and things like that, I think counseling and talking to other people who have been in your situation and things like that are just important to make sure that you've laid the right groundwork to be able to go into it.
That's really, really good. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it's certainly not something that you should do impulsively, right? I mean,
Absolutely not. Oh,
it,
absolutely.
if you, I know for us, when we were thinking about adoption, we were thinking, okay, we need to speak to families, okay, and then we need to sit on it a little bit. And then, you know, it takes time to really, really know that you two are ready for that
No,
decision.
you are so right. And that's, I mean, with any, you know, decision that changes your life and things like that. And like we think, especially I feel like that me being emotionally healthy and ready is going to be what's best for my daughter and my other children that we may have that are Vivian's genetic siblings. Like, I think that's so important, because like I said, our adoption might be closed, but we feel like we have an open heart. And so I think that me being in a good place emotionally is so important for her as she grows and develops and things like that.
Most definitely. Wow. Oh my gosh, I'm so blessed by your story today.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you
so much
so
for letting me
much.
share it. Like I said, I want other people that are, you know, in the infertility community to know that this is out there, and it's something that people can meditate and pray on and just think about. And people that have done IVF to know when their family's complete that this is something that's out there too. That I know it can be so scary to think about what you would do with your embryos, and people that, you know, sometimes they are just left frozen indefinitely, and just to really to know that there's people out there like me that have hearts that are so open and just would love those babies. I mean, I literally could not love her more if she was my blood and genetically of mine, because she is mine. Like, God had this baby planned for me. And I mean, I just think it's a great thing for everyone in the infertility community to know is out there.
I agree. It's so, so good. So good. Is there an Instagram account or any social media handles that you would like to share with anyone if like they have questions and want to reach out?
Yeah, if they wanted to look up the National Embryo Donation Center, they can just look them up, and they have a really awesome website that has tons of like questions answered for both donating families and receiving families. And they have just great social media where they answer lots of questions, and you can see babies that have been born from the NEDC, and now they've had over 1,000 babies actually be born.
Wow.
And so it's just, you know, incredible. But they have a really, really great page that has tons of information. And so if anyone was just curious to learn more about embryo adoption, and that would be a really good place to start.
So thank you for being brave and vulnerable and transparent with all of it.
Thank you for doing that every day on your page, because I know it's an encouragement to so many people.
For sure. It's my pleasure. Do you want to share, you know, and you don't have to, but do you want to share your Instagram handle at all with people?
You can feel free, please, to post it. And I am 150% open to questions. Like, if people want to reach out to me, like with private message or whatever, like whenever I've posted anything and, you know, tagged like embryo adoption, I'll have people message me and stuff.
Cool.
And so my page, I haven't like specifically had like tons of like, you know, leading up to having a family, like the steps and things like that. Like, it's also a personal page, but I love to share, you know, about embryo adoption. And so if people want a place to come, like, or they want to see, you know, a sweet baby born from embryo adoption, They definitely, so please do share, because if anyone ever wants to reach out, I like to send them an open book. So
Good. And remind me, what is your handle?
Andrea_Darby. So,
Okay, underscore.
Andrea_Darby.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you so much. So I enjoyed talking to you.
Enjoyed talking to you too.